It was pretty much the headline quote of Awakenomics. It's written right here. In the age of AI and automation, the most valuable currency is human consciousness. Isolated in my apartment, one crisis after another, and still trying to reconcile identity, orienting yourself on trying to, I guess, achieve for external reasons and orienting that inward, I think was the biggest change and the biggest awakening moment that I had through that period.
Yes.
It does take a lot of courage, and for me, the decision to start my company came from multiple instances of burnout, going through the academic cycles and realizing now is the time.
What would you like to say to you in your current chair and present state from your future version?
I'll just say the first thing that comes to mind, and that is
Welcome to Awakenomics, the podcast, The Voice of Awakening. And I'm Galina, founder of Awakenomics, and today I have the pleasure to have a very special guest on our second session. Peter, welcome to my second Awakenomics podcast. How do you feel today?
Thank you very much. Yeah, feeling good. Ready to go deep.
To go deep.
Yeah.
For our viewers, what is the podcast about? From my first session, we were concentrating more on breakthrough and work. Now we're also going to go deeper because we want to see not just the titles, not just the functions of people, but who are they becoming? Who are they? What kind of values do they bring with us? And before starting and giving the word to Peter, Peter, we met in a very interesting way almost 1 year ago at the startup nights, I remember. Yeah.
Annual event in Switzerland.
Yeah. I was there for my first time, and it was very funny because I had to prepare everything like one day before almost the event. Can you remember what attracted you and why did you come to my booth there?
Well, it was pretty much the headline quote of Awakenomics. It's written right here. In the age of AI and automation, the most valuable currency is human consciousness. And I guess it's also related to my own character. I'm very curious about human consciousness and exploring that deeper.
Yeah.
Also in my self-practice, I do a lot of meditation, and that already attracted me to going deep, understanding that there's something more than just what we see externally.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for me, it was very interesting because at this event, you meet a lot of people, different characters. And I remembered you that you came very smiley person, very pleasant,
thank you.
Yeah, very interested in the topic. And afterwards, we got connected, and you invited me into your own podcast, The Grand Challengers. And if I remember correctly, I was 59 episodes.
No, well done.
I did my homework. And it was a great conversation when you were also interviewing me, going a little bit deeper on human consciousness. And it was a great experience. And then I decided, okay, let's have this back to you, or to give you the bow back. And I also invited you today to talk about you, and not just for your achievements or for your profile, but you as a person, because that's very important. And the idea of the podcast of Awakenomics is to create a voice where the people can express who they are and discuss about also difficult topics and value. So with this, we can start also with a real conversation. So Peter, would you please introduce yourself? Who are you? And here you can include both versions. Peter, the entrepreneur, and Peter, also the human being behind it. So if you have to put that in a nutshell.
Yeah, I guess in a nutshell, the entrepreneur version, or meanwhile, I'm pondering the word solopreneur because, that is at the moment what I am. So Peter Bach, I am the founder and director of Eden CT, which is my own company in Switzerland. And I basically am a consultant, researcher, and educator, and I help cities embrace the power of nature to create more livable and resilient urban environments. I'm also the host of the Grand Challenges podcast, as you've just mentioned, a passion project of mine that I started 3.5 years ago now. And I'm quite active also in the academic space, having been an academic for 15 plus years. I studied in Australia, civil engineer by training, then dabbled in urban planning. I always joke on my show that if I could draw better, I would have become an architect. which kind of reveals a bit about the human side. So I guess moving on to the human part, I guess I'm someone who has a relentless curiosity for chasing after interesting ideas, interesting topics. I'm constantly wanting to learn about things that relate to, I guess, us as a society, to cities, to building cities, and in particular nature as well, because nature's played a very important role in my life at the start when you don't realize it, and then later on when, as you put it, you awaken to your purpose, to what you think would give you the greatest joy in doing in life.
That's a great thing. I was also very fascinated when I heard about the podcast and what you're actually doing, because creating and helping the cities to be more green and to be more close to nature is something that we are definitely missing. We live in Zurich, both of us. Zurich is pretty green, but if you look at other cities as well around the world, the big metropolis where we have only concrete and no or very little nature, it's very interesting. And do you see, Peter, any kind of returning back to nature from people, or from main cities going back to rural areas, or have wanting to have a little bit more contact with the nature?
I think we're definitely seeing a huge emergence of people wanting to be in contact with nature at the personal level. I think many, are taking up activities that relate to nature in some
Yeah.
point. Whether it's grounding themselves in nature by going out to the riverside and meditating or playing.
Yeah.
You see a lot of kids play in the water, which is lovely to see in today's digital age. Or whether it's designers and planners actually realizing, hey, if it's hot like a day like today, we're currently going through a massive heat wave here,
Yeah.
then trees themselves are the best places to be,
Absolutely.
underneath the shade. So I think we're seeing it on both fronts. And I guess there's this realization towards, why don't we try to bring nature into the cities more? Because we've built our cities to be so efficient, so car oriented over the past century, that we end up with giant concrete jungles.
Absolutely.
Where nature has no space at the end, because it loses out, it loses the argument to other features like, footpaths or shop fronts, or, alfresco dining, or just the streets themselves. So, the problem is, the realization is there and it's great, but we have to work with the existing palette of what we've built already. And
Yeah.
it's not always that easy to adapt and to change. We'd have to do it in a stepwise progression.
Yeah.
But I think if the human mindset and the realization is starting to emerge, and we're seeing that society wants this because they do appreciate these moments in nature, then I think the time is ripe to actually take action and to start moving towards it.
That's very interesting. We'll go a little bit deeper on the project that you're currently dealing and the challenges, of course, because
Yeah.
I can imagine it's not just you and the ideas and the people, but probably the government or the state has also a big part in it. But we'll go a little bit deeper on that. Tell me about, what are your values when we're talking about Peter? What are the 3 or 4 values that describes you as a person?
Oof.
That's an HR question, okay?
HR question. Values. I mean, values change in humans over time, and I think if I had to put a stamp on our current time, I think for me, what's most important is that I'm able to, work with integrity and to be able to communicate my knowledge to the world in a way that helps others. I believe in, building a constant self development, self improvement, and prioritizing oneself. Because if you are, happy in your own mind and happy in what you do, then you can definitely deliver change in the world.
So your own happiness first.
Exactly.
That's a value. And also I heard out contribution, just after you reach your own happiness, also to contribute, to educate, to give further for the world. Okay?
Exactly. I mean, I think the greatest joy comes in giving. The simplest analogy you can give to someone is, if you receive a present versus if you give a present, what makes you feel happier? Sure, it's nice to open a box,
receive,
but
Yeah.
for me, if I give someone a present, I'm doing it because I want to see their reaction. I want to see how happy they are, and to see, that I've genuinely been able to help a person, contribute to the person, and to
contribute.
show them my appreciation for them. And I think when we do service, when we give back, then that's where I think the greatest growth and depth comes.
Especially when it's genuine, you don't expect something in return, because I think that's the
Exactly.
smallest difference that makes something that you expect to get in return, or you're doing it without any expectations for a future work.
Precisely.
And here I have to say I was extremely thankful and grateful when you called me and asked me, Galina, I have this podcast, would you like to be part of it? Because it was like the moment when you saw me, and that's for me was like for my one of my happiest moments. So
Oh,
thank you very much also for that. And
I'm glad to hear that.
yeah, no, it's really important, especially in the beginning, for people who are trying new challenges. It's very important to have one or two people that are genuine there for you and just say, you can do it. Let's do it together, the support.
And the podcast is, I call it the passion project, but it is also a way I can see myself giving back to the world. And I get a lot more out of it when I see my guests being able to open up, being able to reflect. And, the greatest reward comes from when you finish a recording and the guest tells you how much they enjoyed it and how much or how thankful they are for the experience. And it is really about creating an experience,
Yep.
much like how you've done this really great setup. I'm really liking the
flowers.
really liking the flowers and yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Thank you very much. Now we are going to a little bit provocative question or funny question. If your life could be filmed in a series in a Netflix, what would be that, or which chapter would you like to be filmed?
I thought about this, and the answer came surprisingly easy, because I think the biggest lessons you learn are the ones in crises. And so there was a particular moment in my life. It was around 2018 to shortly after the end of the pandemic, where I went through a series of, I call it the cascade crises era of my life, which also eventually led to where I am now. And I think, that is really what, on the one hand, allowed me to grow even more and to look further inwards. It taught me the real value of the knowledge you gain when you read about self-development. You try new practices like meditation or or reading just in general, and also realizing finally how much of an impact nature had on my life, and that what I was doing for the world, or what I am doing for the world, is of real value and truly aligned with myself.
Yeah. I'm just imagining a movie on Netflix, with nature breaking down crisis and then going back to nature. No, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being open to talk about that. And if you allow me to go a little bit deeper on the challenge and on the moment that you had, if you could a little bit describe this moment of change or of crisis. We all have those moments, correct?
Yeah.
But what was the moment for you? How did you feel? What kind of fears did you have back then?
Yeah, so I guess to give some context, I mean, the cascade, pretty much simple, several issues happening at the same time. It began with coming out of a long-term relationship, just shortly, I think a year after switching countries, then losing my father to leukemia, who has been a very solid foundation in my life and to whom I've oriented a lot of what I do against as well. So losing that anchor, going through that process, it's never an easy moment to lose a parent, and it takes some time, and you have to give yourself that time. Then shortly followed by the pandemic, which I think we all understand, the full isolation, and also dealing with pushbacks, setbacks in my academic career. I had changed countries to, you could say, start the academic cycle anew or take the next step in the academic cycle, and I was hitting a roadblock. I pursued a career in academia for 15 plus years because I felt I like to develop knowledge and to give that knowledge to the world. And I thought that academia was going to be the pathway for me to do that. And I really enjoy research, and I still do research in my day-to-day. But with those roadblocks, you sort of end up being isolated and thinking, am I doing something wrong?
Yeah.
Am I, you know, have I taken the wrong path? You start to have regrets of having left. I was in Australia for 11 years and I moved to Switzerland. You start to think, was that the right choice? You start to wonder, should I move again? Do I have to
Yeah.
start from zero? And, there's nothing wrong with starting from zero. I think a fresh start is always important. We have eras in life, but of course, on what basis would you do that? And so isolated in my apartment, one crisis after another, and still trying to reconcile identity, orienting yourself on trying to, I guess, achieve for external reasons and orienting that inward, I
Yep.
think was the biggest change and the biggest awakening moment that I had through that period.
So I hear a lot of challenges at once, as you said, moving countries. That's alone, it's a very big challenge because you have the cultural difference between, I guess, Australia is different than Switzerland. I can imagine in several, at least in several aspects. Then going into academic way where you think you will find your purpose or your calling for helping and educating, and then you have setbacks or blocks. Was it more the system? Was it more the change? Was it more a particular human relationship that kind of contributed to that
I think it was a
feelings?
bit of everything.
Yeah.
So, changing countries was something that wasn't as much of an issue. Yes, as an adaptation curve, but I welcomed that with open arms. And, you know, coming to Switzerland was also a decision I made because I was going through similar roadblocks in Australia. And at some point, I felt change was needed. So
Yeah.
it was a well timed change. And I think we will all realize that in our life sometimes that there has to be change and we're willing to embrace it. But I guess, yeah, when you come across trying to achieve against metrics that are defined and you think that that is enough, and then you run into human relations, and there's always politics, and academia is the kind of area where you need to have a label, and I don't ascribe to a single label.
What do you mean by that? What kind of label?
you know, I I labeled myself as an engineer just
Yeah.
now, but I would say that I'm purely an engineer. I have an engineering mindset, and I feel that is what university education is about nowadays. It's about teaching you a way of thinking. So I have an engineer's way of thinking because I'm constantly systematic. I'm trying to, well, not always optimizing, but I try to adopt multiple perspectives. But that doesn't mean that I do only engineering stuff.
Yeah.
When I went through my PhD, I sprinkled in urban planning because that was something that I really loved. When it took me a while to realize, but the way I think is in terms of world building. I like to build worlds in my mind. When I was a kid, I always said, "Hey, I want to become an inventor." I was never
Oh,
the kind of
nice.
person that would say, "Oh, I want to be a pilot or
Yeah.
a doctor."
Inventor.
And I was like, I couldn't find the right word, and I settled on inventor. Reflecting back on this years later, I start to realize, well, I'm both an inventor, which somehow shouts engineer, but at the same time also designer, because if you distinguish the two, at least in my mind, a designer imagines a world without problems, and an inventor tries to build
New
that
world.
world. And if you
Or- yeah.
combine the two, you have a very powerful combination.
Yeah.
And so, after thinking about it, engineers like to forecast, predict how hard it's going to be tomorrow, or, when is the next traffic jam going to occur. Mind you, I did enjoy traffic engineering, never went deeper, should have. But I'm someone who likes to backcast. I envision a future, so that's the designer thinking, where it seems like the world is good, problems are solved, at least the ones we're dealing with. I think
Yeah.
solving one problem always creates new problems, but hey, that's life. And then I like to backcast from that. So how do I get there? How do I change and move the needle so that we can progress to that future? And after realizing that, you start to see, well, this requires an interdisciplinary skill set.
Yeah.
This requires knowledge from many domains. And it was something that I thought academia could give me. I was a water engineer. I trained in urban water management, but I was also interested in ecology, in urban heat, urban climatology, also the societal aspects. I did a research project where I was conducting semi-structured interviews across Australia to understand the governance and policy aspects around nature and cities. And it was something so amazing to really delve into this multiple perspectives. But
Yeah.
that label then, of course, fell away. You wouldn't know what label to place on me. And this was unfortunately what academia demanded of me.
And that's very interesting because nowadays, we are all discussing if the educational system is up to date with the reality and with the business, what's going on. And I also have two kids. They are smaller. They are just entering the educational world with forensics. But I also see that the educational system is unfortunately not up to date. It was not up to date at our time. We are millennials, the two of us. But right now, for the younger generation, it's a very much, as you said, putting it into labeling. And I guess in the next generations, it will be more on demand. What do you need? What does society need? So you can cherry pick what you need, because if you put yourself 5 years in such education, then you come out and then the world is totally different, then you're not more adaptable towards the business anymore. Or at least those are the conversations that we are also having across education.
I
And
totally agree.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, our education system was built on, I guess, the industrialization, the fact that all of a sudden we can make things more
yeah,
efficient, So this led to siloing of disciplines because you would have one company specializing in something, another specializing in something else, and if they work together, they can deliver, infrastructure
infrastructure,
or,
yeah,
products at a much faster rate. And, the age of, industrialization has been surpassed by the information age, by the AI age. And I'm seeing that we're moving towards more smaller units nowadays
yeah,
because large corporation style work, don't get me wrong, it's still important. I think it's still needed. But I think a lot of the innovations comes from connecting the dots.
yeah.
Because by optimizing and making things too efficient in our city, we end up with, what we're seeing now, everything built around cars, things that are so rigid and cannot stand up to change. The more rigid you make something or the bigger things become, the harder it is to
The
change
harder it
them.
is to change. Absolutely, they're not so agile. Well, talking about your old identity that you had back then, and Peter now, standing here, what do you think that you have changed in yourself? Which quality is not part of your identity anymore?
I think the biggest change that I took after that cascade crisis was really focusing on what I want, what I want to achieve and whether it matches with what I want to do. And it's not an overnight change, it doesn't happen in an instant, but you take steps towards it. And it's also in those times when you really see the real value of the knowledge you gain from reading self-development books as well, and where the reading starts to become meaningful because you actually take this abstract knowledge and put it into
Knowledge.
practice. I think the biggest change that I had to make was looking inwards and realizing that I have to do things on my own terms that I'm happy with and not to satisfy someone else's needs.
So pleasing somebody else's needs or living upon other expectations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes it takes longer to realize that, and often it does take a crisis to realize that, because that's when the knowledge really becomes, or the depth of the knowledge really shows itself.
And sometimes it's scary, Peter, because it's connected also with fears such as, am I going to be accepted? Am I going to be valued? Am I going to be loved? I'm not really sure, but we can talk. I can relate to my story. I had also expectation on my family, which I guess is part of every single person, or almost, where you have the expectations of your father, of your mom, about education or about your career development. Did you have something similar as well at your
Oh,
family?
definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, as kids, we model ourselves to our parents, and my dad has always been a very strong role model to me. I always aspire to have his strong nature and strong will. You get to picture it. German expat, very strong-headed in Asia doing business. I mean, he was very inspiring to me, and he also gave me some of the strongest pieces of advice going through university, starting to navigate the real world. I left home at 18 years of age to go study in Australia, so I would only return once every 6 months to visit my parents. So I had to start living on my own from pretty much when you're ready to leave the house, to
Yeah.
leave the nest. And when you have that guidance for so many years and then all of a sudden that guidance disappears, it's quite hard to then tell yourself, well, it's only guidance. It's not the goalpost you should be looking at. And the only acceptance you need is self-acceptance. And once you start realizing that, you know, you will start to see the strength of relying on external validation decrease, the importance of it. I'm not going to say it's going to decrease and disappear overnight. Again, change takes time. Sometimes I still wonder, what other people would think of what I'm doing. But I guess it's a muscle you train.
Yeah.
You have to train through experience, through growth, through constant struggle as well.
Yeah.
I like to liken it to playing a piano piece or learning a piano piece. I played piano since I was 4. I have to touch it.
Next time
more.
you can bring that.
Oh geez, I have to practice. I have to pick it up again. I think I've lost my dexterity over the years. But learning a piece, I guess the best way to learn it is to actually try to play it from start to finish. And yes, it's going to be messy at the start, but that repetition builds the muscle memory, and you're basically throwing yourself into the deep end, because when you stare at the sheet music and you see all these notes, your mind is constantly thinking, okay, am I going to hit the right note? Am I going to manage this jump with my left hand or right hand? And oftentimes you focus on, I guess, the mechanics of it first. And as you get comfortable, you bring in the expression. I don't know, but that's how I learned pieces in the past. And life is like that. Unless you build that muscle memory, and you're gonna struggle. It's gonna show up over and over again that I myself would seek external validation from time to time, or worry about external factors. Over time, it gets less and less.
Yeah.
So
that's very interesting topic when we're talking about anyway external validation and current worlds such as social media, all the younger generation, which are actually in the younger years, they are developing their self-validation, who they are searching themselves. And when the outer world is so loud, then there is a bigger danger that you validate yourself with outer opinion as well. But if I come back to the culture like 30 or 40 years ago, we were living in small villages where everything was rural. So there was the society defining who you are. How many people would have gotten out of the village? Very few, if you are looking like 100 years ago.
Indeed.
So actually, this was a core value for a lot of generations, what are belonging, what other people say, collaboration, which is not bad in itself, but it has to be aligned with your own values. And not to be afraid of doing something because of what the other people are going to tell. This is, for example, I see that in when me and my mom, when we are with the kids, and she's from the older generation, which I really respect. They went through a lot of things. On the other hand, you see things when she said, okay, don't do that, people will laugh at you and say, Mom, who gives a care about that? Sorry. And then you see how the older generation are really like forced to have this kind of thinking. What is the society going to tell them?
There's that internal external persona that you have to put up, and I think it's important that we understand what we're willing to show externally, what we're willing to show internally. The most important thing is to be yourself, but that also means that there'll be certain things you will allow yourself to do in public, and others that you won't. And I think understanding your own boundaries, that's perhaps the most important. It's what creates character, and whether society likes it or not, you will find your tribe that will subscribe to that ultimately.
If you can think of one piece of advice that your father gave you, Peter, in the years until now, which helped you and formed you very much of the person who you are, what would that be?
There's always one image that he gave me that reminds me of being, I guess, cautious, being strategic about how I navigate the professional environment. There's a lot of things about the personal level that I think you read elsewhere, but there was one advice he always gave me that help me understand, why certain people take certain actions. And that is the analogy of a rice bowl. So everyone at the end of the day is going to be defending their own rice bowl. whether you're navigating office politics or whether you're navigating interpersonal
Relation.
relationships. At the end of the day, people will act in defense of their food, of their nourishment, of their rice bowl. And it's not that it's a bad thing, but I think as long as you're aware of that, it allows you to see people with a bit more, I guess, openness, and to understand and not be quick to judge, not be quick
Oh,
to
interesting.
attack as
Yeah.
well, because it's human nature. I think we all fight for survival. There's always, you see so many podcasts talking about the primal brain and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
thinking brain.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it is part of human nature. But if you can be open and realize that and accept that, that's just how it is, then you internally, I think, can seek peace, and you can, just deal with the situation in a very, Buddhist teachings always talk about equanimity, not neither good nor bad, just being there. It is what it is. And yeah, that analogy stayed with me for years, and I think of it quite often.
That's
So
very
yeah.
powerful. I remember that with the rice bowl. I think that's very, very, very strong, not because you put yourself in the shoes of the other, but also that you understand that it's not only good at this world. There is always a balance.
Exactly,
That's
and
not
it's not
just you.
necessarily you. It's
Yeah,
just they would do it.
for themselves as well, not in a bad manner.
It's for their family, for their own survival. I
Yeah.
mean, we all have to eat somehow and live
Yeah.
somehow.
I can align with that a lot because as children you have, or as young people, you have very optimistic or at least idealistic way of looking at things. At least I can relate to that as
Which is
well.
not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing, but at the end you have to have both things.
Mm.
You as you said, you now have to set boundaries because otherwise it takes out of your energy and of your self love, if you can put it like that. Okay, now going from that to those challenges coming to you now and to today, what are the projects that you are doing? And because thanks to this crisis that you had and the person that you have become right now, what are the things that currently you are working on?
So, I mean, there's a few different things that I'm working on, but primarily, as part of my work, I help cities. So I have some cities as clients and architecture studios, and we work together. So I join teams, or I act as, call it, the glue between disciplines. And I do a lot of data analysis, modeling, simulation, spatial mapping of a particular project, whether it's a neighborhood or whether it's a smaller site or an entire city. And through that, I try to teach them not just what nature to put in, but why. I think to understand the world, and to do things well, we need to look at things from first principles. So, why is it working? How is it working? I always talk about blue-green intelligence, so nature's intelligence. There is a reason why trees are cooler, on hot summer days. There is a reason why when we use water effectively in our environment, we can create lush greenery. We can create, very nice environments that look pleasing to the eye, that have physiological and psychological benefits to people. But unless we understand how it works, water being the simplest example, if you put a barrier up, water's going to find its way around. If you put a hole in the ground, water's going to slow down. It's going to get stopped. So think flooding. How do you deal with it? Start from those principles rather than just saying, "Oh, Copenhagen did this. Let's do the same thing." Because it's not a one size fits all solution. So I get a lot of joy in teaching cities through the projects how to leverage that and to train that skill. And in addition to that, I still do a lot of research. I mean, I've left academia, and I felt it's because academia wasn't willing to walk out of the infamous ivory tower, as we talk about, with me. But I haven't left research. I still enjoy doing research. And I think knowledge work, which is what I call it now, is going to become even more important going into the future, because we need to be able to, I guess, query all the knowledge that we've built and also create new knowledge if we're going to come up with more intelligent solutions going forward. So I work with universities still, different ones. I just finished a project with two universities in the Netherlands, Leiden University and Wageningen, where we built a software that will help planners and cities, I guess, better understand what opportunities exist in urban environments. So, I mean, that's on the professional side. On the creative side, there's my podcast, which, going strong and really enjoying branching out topics now. I mean, I started very specific, but in the recent years, I've managed to, get guests that are tackling many other types of grand challenges, and also just, delving into things that I couldn't do as effectively in the past, because now with the power of AI, I feel like, it's enabled me to express myself more visually, whether it's in illustrations or whether it's in 3D design, or also through audio. I mean, I've been playing around reviving some old songs that I used to compose as, I guess, shortly before the end of high school. Should have been practicing for my piano diploma. I got stuck in composing jazz funk, but
Oh,
okay.
right.
So, yeah, and seeing, I guess, where the path takes me, because I'm still curious. I mean, I'm someone who has multiple parallel interests. And what I've kind of noticed over time, and this may apply to many as well, you spend your life going down different roads at different paces, whether it's music or whether it's, drawing or mathematics or programming, for example. And eventually these paths meet and they produce something. And somehow for me, I've seen that now with my graphic design interests,
Yeah.
dabbling with, trying to make cool illustrations, with the programming software development and my work in nature-based solutions. And there are a few other paths in the back of my mind, and I wonder if these are going to also converge eventually. And
Yeah.
maybe that is what true life purpose is. Maybe it is the convergence of multiple paths,
Yeah.
some starting at childhood and others coming up with time.
Yeah. Maybe that's a very, very deep reflection. I'm just wondering right now for the viewers or for the listeners who are also listening. We talk that, when you are starting a new project, you always have doubts, especially in the beginning. If you didn't have experience, what will people tell about me, or if I'm going to be successful? Why do I do that at all if there is not a payback right in the beginning? And we were talking that in the beginning, or when you're starting something new, it's good to have like-minded people who are helping and pushing you through this way, or this moment of doubt when you have. Is it that also something that you experienced,
Oh,
when you started?
definitely. I mean, people were, I guess, hesitant when I told them that. Many were encouraging, and even the hesitant ones were definitely encouraging. But I think when you're doing something that is out of the ordinary, although solopreneurship isn't out of the ordinary nowadays, but if you're one of the early adopters, then I guess people, they are reluctant. They are not sure. They'd rather wait and see. That wait
Instead
and
of
see basis.
jump and be
Exactly, and it
enthusiastic.
does
Yeah.
take a lot of
Yeah.
courage. And for me, the decision to start my company came from multiple instances of burnout, going through the academic cycles and realizing now is the time. I had the idea for the company quite some time ago, back in my university studies. Actually, when you think about it, as a kid, I remember playing offers and making my own business cards when I discovered how to use, I think it was called Creative Writer. It was a very old piece of software back when
Okay.
computers literally just came out. But I remembered making business cards and trying to mimic, my mum was running a home business in trading, and, my dad had his office around the corner. So a lot of their material and resources were often stored at home. So as a kid, I would always mimic that. But, that idea already existed. There was a seed somewhere. And, as I went through the academic career, I could see ways in which I could start a business around it. But sometimes it really takes these crisis moments to tell you now is the time. You have no choice. And yeah, coming back to the original question, I think if you yourself are convinced that it's going to work, or that you're confident, and I think it takes a bit of thought, but if you have put in that thought and you have rigorously evaluated what the options are, and also have done the fear setting, of what could go wrong, what's the worst thing that can happen, and realizing, well, if everything goes head up, then I can always look for another job.
Yeah.
You have your skill sets, you have your specialization, then it's I think worth doing. when I started, or just before I started, I mean, I actually got headhunted by an engineering company in Switzerland, and they actually asked if I wanted to join them. And I mean, for me, that was an amazing feeling because I felt, okay, I really appreciate that, you saw potential in what I could do, and it's really great. But I also politely declined because for the very reason that I said, this has been brewing in my head for the longest time, and I know I have to do it. Even if it doesn't work, at least when I'm 50, 60, 70, I won't have regrets that I didn't try at least.
At
And I
least.
think
Yeah.
trying is the most important thing. It is a shock to the system starting your own company. I'm sure you know that yourself, but you get used to it.
And I can also say it's trainable, as you said. It's just the first step. It's very scary. So for our viewers, if you're unsure, but you want, please contact us. We can give you a little bit of support.
Always happy to share.
And happy to share, because we all go through those things. And the moment that you see that the other person has this problem as well, or this challenge, and he say, okay, you can do it, then you just are more courageous about that. And I think courage is one of the keywords today that you say, because you have to have courage to get out of the box. And,
You do.
Yeah.
And not just courage, but belief in yourself, that you know the material the best, you have an idea, you have a strategy, and that you yourself are capable of doing it. It's not what others can say. I think take the encouragement from the others, but that you will be met with quite a bit of resistance. And some of it may never go away, which is fine. I think it's important because you have to remember what your values are, and to take that step, you want to basically have no regrets, later on.
That you live somebody else's life.
Exactly. Well, you said it better than me.
Thank you very much, Peter. We will close this great podcast with one last signature question. And for that, you can take a little bit of time to consider how do you want to answer. But imagine yourself 10, 15 years from now. And we are sitting in probably exactly the same setting. Imagine yourself, and you went through a lot of things, you experienced a lot, and you would record right now a message from your future self to you currently. What would be that message? What would you like to say to you in your current chair and present state from your future version? You can turn to the camera, of course. Another HR question.
You love your HR questions.
Yeah,
Huh?
take your time, and whenever you're ready.
I mean, I'll just say the first thing that comes to mind, and that is, I know you hate the message being patient, and I know that you have too many things in your head, but being patient and taking the time to pursue those interests, you will see that it pays off in the end, that things will converge. And yeah, just be patient, practice patience, and practice it well.
Thank you very much, Peter. Well, dear viewers, that was the Voice of Awakening. As you see, we look behind the positions, we look into the people who we are all becoming. Thank you very much. See you next time.
Thank you very much.